The first one is when we're talking about an issue, we have to really fully understand what we're talking about. Let's pinpoint. It's very, very important to not speak in vagaries and elusiveness. Let's narrow right down to what the issue is for you specifically. This is why I'm bringing a lot of information for you to be able to say, oh, there I am, that's me. Module 1, welcome. Here we are, pinpointing the problem, the kind of silence in your relationship. And maybe it's also the kind of silence you yourself have used, you yourself are familiar with. What is it exactly? This is the broad definition that I do use. Just a quick, it's generally any situation where a partner stops communicating, either by not talking, avoiding conversation, or emotionally pulling away. This can look different in whatever relationship dynamics you may have. So it might just mean for you, it might be that person hasn't really shut down completely and stopped talking. But that person is usually a big talker and they are not. And there's just something in the way that they're presenting themselves that is sort of a bit of a wall. As you'll know, there are many levels to this. It can happen when someone just needs a little bit of space or a complete emotional shutdown. And also there's the withdrawal that happens. What silent treatment, this kind of dynamic requires two people, obviously, one who is on the receiving end of it and one who is in the doing end of it. And unfortunately, sometimes both are receiving and doing. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. What we need to know is that it leaves somebody feeling ignored, unsure, disconnected, and a host of all other emotions. And we'll be talking about that. There's a lot of confusion about this term, and I get it. It's an overused term. And so what I want you to see the spectrum that I've laid out for you to fully understand what I mean. Here we go, the spectrum of silence in intimate relationships. If you look through here, there are different levels to it. And I've been doing a lot of research, and many of it entails so many, and I just sort of narrowed it down to 5 for ease of understanding. So when we're talking about somebody who just is reflective in their silence, this is just someone who needs to pull themselves together. And it's not necessarily a stressful thing between the two. Oftentimes, there's even something like, I just need a few minutes. Actually, I'll be back in about 15 or 20. And this is something that I've fallen into using myself. I wasn't always the healthiest partner, but today, the healthy version of me, I don't even need to say, I just need a few minutes. I need to kind of gather myself. I physically remove myself from the room, and my husband already knows. He can tell from my body language that I'm overwhelmed, and there's no need to say, oh, what's going on? And there's no need to say, when will you come back? Mine is pretty much to the nose, 15, 20 minutes, and I'm coming back with my own concise summary of what I was experiencing and why. So when it comes to reflective silence, it's healthy. In fact, I highly recommend it to many partners because it's just sometimes for those of us who really do need that time to settle. And if you're a highly emotional person in general, this is a really good one to use just to do that. Again, it involves telling your partner, I'll be back in a moment. And that's it. That leaves your partner not confused, and they know that you will be back, and I don't need to worry about how this is going to play out. All right. The next one is the cooling off silence. It's fairly close to the first one. It's probably more heated and a little bit more emotional. And maybe the time frame for coming back isn't quite mentioned, or maybe it's vague. So it might just be, I'll be back. I don't know, but it's not too bad because the other partner is left with some knowledge that this is something that will happen fairly soon. We'll be sorting it out. And so, yeah, it's usually short term and it's communicated and it brings the tension down or avoids someone from saying hurtful things. And it also serves to calm oneself down. All right, so now we're looking at the distant silence right here. Whew. I get so excited when I talk about this, I got to calm myself down. Distant silence It's a little bit more passive. It's unintentional, but it is still pulling away. And the difference here is there is an emotional withdrawal. Like you can kind of see that it's clear that they're pulling out a bit. Not enough to cause you great distress, but enough for you to say, ooh, something's going on there. And so, yeah, so they do emotionally pull back a little bit and they're not fully engaged. I should mention that the other two, with the reflective silence and with the cooling off, they haven't cut you off. So you can still talk to them. They have, it's like, don't, it's like, okay, you won't, it won't get much worse if you interrupt a little bit, but please don't because they've asked for it. So with the distance silence, they're more further back than they normally are. And you can feel that. It's usually situational when things are really quite stressful, but it's not the usual, that's not their go-to. And it's just sometimes a sign that somebody's really overwhelmed. Again, the time frame, that could be a little bit dicey. As we get to the avoidant silence, this is where it starts to really go bad. So this is where it becomes a source of, it's a way to avoid. The purpose now is to avoid. It's not to reset a little bit. It's not to regroup and to find my thoughts. It's really to say in some way, maybe not even verbally saying it, I don't want to deal with this right now. I can't handle this. So you feel that wall more. This will create the emotional distance between two people. Of course it would. And it's not so much yeah, I think I've already said that it's not necessarily a sorting out, but it's more like a blocking. And it does harm the connection. Now we get to the nasty kind, which is the full on emotional shutdown. That is the worst kind. That is if you ever look up the clinical definition of the silent treatment, it is this. It is the intentional cutting off of communication and emotional connection. It is used to punish. It is used to control. It is often used to exert power and to manipulate a partner into behaving a certain way. That's the kind that we should all be running from. It is not a it's not something that belongs in any relationship whatsoever. I think I made my point very, very clear there. And it's really hard to not always and never in content like this, but I do my best to at least make a point, to get a point across. This might be difficult to change if somebody is in the habit of doing this, and if there are deeper rooted issues that makes them do this that they're not resolving. Much more on that later. I've talked about the spectrum. I have summarized some of it here for your benefit. If we really look at it, they are different in the use relationship dynamics are different in 6 primary ways. 6. Basically, the intention, is it to reset or is to block or to manipulate? The bad kind. Are they still kind of communicating? As I mentioned, for the first 3, there was still a little bit. So again, that reduces some of the tension if there's still that, and there isn't that big stonewalling. Do not come close. I am in control here. You have no say. That's the hard part. If there's still someone emotionally connected to you, like again, you could feel that, right? And sometimes if they're still emotionally connected, they care about your feelings, and you can kind of sense that a bit. They're not so wrapped up that it's only about them. And so that's another sign there. That's another way that these things are different. How long it lasts, and more importantly, if there is a time given, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. I'll get right to this part because I really want you to know this right off the bat. If you have some kind of an impasse and some kind of argument and some kind of thing, and I want to just go and I want to think about things and whatever, I need a break, please don't go more than 24 hours, one full day of not talking about the issue. I say that because the longer you don't talk about it, the worse it gets and the more it builds up. That is the last thing we want. The point is always to resolve the issues. Back on topic, the Another way that these silence types are different is the impact it has on the person left behind. Just, oh, do they feel just a little bit uncomfortable? Oh, that kind of sucks. Or is it, wow, I feel rejected and abandoned. I feel terribly alone. Huge difference, isn't it? And then the last one, of course, is their willingness to resolve the problem at hand, their accountability on the issue, and their desire to fix it. Very, very big difference. Lots of information I've just given you. Ooh. So, what do we really need to know about this? Well, every situation is different. This is a learned behavior. Now, when we say learned, some people stumble upon this way of dealing just by chance, and it kind of works for them. As in, well, I didn't want to talk about things anymore, so I shut right down and then we didn't talk about this anymore. Well, that's kind of cool. I'll use that again. And so it's not only that you were subjected to this as a child, but many have, but it's really just like I learned to do this, or maybe I saw somebody do it and I picked up this habit and it just kind of stuck. And are we born with this predisposition? No, traced and traced and traced, and there is no scientific research to support the fact that this is a genetic thing. It might be an environmental thing that we, again, like I said, have observed.